All right, guys, Feeble Fakie, probably my favorite trick in all of skateboarding. I don't think I've done the trick more than I've done this trick. It's just my go-to. Whenever there's a spot that's too hard to skate, that's what I do. When I'm doing lines on mini ramp and I'm not sure what to put in between, that's the trick I do. And once you get it down, it's a very easy trick to do consistently. And it just feels incredible, just being able to sit on it and kind of coast it. Yeah, there's no other feeling. So in this video, I'm gonna break down all the techniques from like getting into it and then up to grinding it across ramps and everything in between. Also, got some really cool footage of my friend, Dr. Richard Brown. He's a 54-year-old philosophy teacher, and he just learned Feeble Fakies like 10 minutes ago in this quarter pipe. And it's much different than me talking about everything I've learned over the years. Like, yeah, that's useful, 20 years of doing Feeble Fakies. But there's just something unique about watching someone currently learning the trick and they're fully, engulfed in the process of learning the trick, and they can articulate better the things that are going wrong and what the difficulties are. So yeah, we're gonna go over that footage and kind of talk about what he had to correct to learn the trick. Okay, so the first thing to consider is the ramp you're gonna be learning the trick on. So this is like a little mellow 2-foot quarter pipe, and the more mellow a ramp is, the longer you're gonna have to manual to get that truck back into the ramp, right? So it's a little easier to hang up on something more mellow, but it's also safer, right? Because the steeper the ramp is, easier it is to slip out. You're gonna be going much faster right when you come in. It's kind of like more of a jolt. So just try to find which works best for you and what you're more comfortable with. And with mellow ramps like this one, it's gonna be harder to lock into a feeble because the board really has no room to turn sideways like the way it should be. So in the beginning stages of doing a feeble, you're probably gonna get your whole truck on the board and lay this truck flat, just like this. But eventually you wanna just lock in on this one wheel, get the board sideways and touching, and kind of hold it more at an angle. And as you can see, I can't even like push the board into that position on this mellow quarter pipe here. So, if it's too mellow, it can be good to just get your whole truck on and kind of practice that on top feeble motion just to get the feeling down. But eventually you want to focus on getting sideways. Okay, then you have ramps like this where it's flat kind of coping. They're probably not as common as ramps with coping, but this can, depending on how mellow or how steep it is, make it easier or harder for you to do the trick. So in this case, with the steepness and size of this ramp, this makes it easier to do a Feeble Fakie, in my opinion, for a beginner. Because when you're coming up, you could just keep doing rock fakies and missing your wheel and just still feel that safe motion, right? So you're still in that rock fakie realm, coming up, doing that, and if you squeak your wheel, it's not really a big deal, You get it up there, you come back in. Also, in the beginning, it could feel harder to get your wheel off of that coping. Eventually, when you get good at the trick, that kind of gives you comfort and you're locked in like solid. But when you're not good at coming out, that's kind of a big hurdle to get over. So something like this flat coping here can make it easy to learn. All right, so in the beginning, you're gonna wanna get on top of the coping. That's gonna be usually your natural instinct if you're first learning it, like just to feel safe. But it's just much easier, specifically with Feeble Fakies, to keep that board sideways, because coming up from being all the way on top of the coping is kind of scary, to be honest. It's not impossible, but just locking in like this and figuring out how to get that truck, look at all the wiggle room there is when you go to press on the tail, right? You're like, this just has a more predictable movement. You just lock your one wheel on sideways, you're pushed in, and then you come right back in. And another common mistake is like right when you're going to lock in, you don't press on the tail enough to get that turn into the feeble. And that's usually comes from the fear of like actually locking into it. So you just put your front foot down early to lock into a rock. So you kind of like cut it short. So just make sure, you're not overshooting it, but you press just enough to actually turn and get into the feeble. So this is where I see most people giving up on this trick, and that's coming back in. So I've seen incredible skateboarders, right? People that are good at feebles, feeble rails, even like handrails and stuff, and they lock in the Feeble Fakie and they jump off the board, and they even try it a decent amount of times, and then they just quit, right? Something about it just feels awkward. They don't feel like they're gonna come in, and they don't want to pitch to the flat. So it's crazy how many people are actually capable of doing this trick, but because of that awkwardness of that come in, just bail on it, you know, never actually learn it. One of the main things, and I noticed this before with Dr. Richard Brown, I'm gonna show you guys the footage in a second, is when you go to come back in, you have to think about it like a rewind. Like you know, everyone jumps off to their toe side and jumps away from the board. You have to think about it like you're going in and you're rewinding and coming exactly back where you came from. That plus pressing on your toes and your heel just makes it much easier to come back in and helps yank that wheel off the coping. If you press on your toe here, it'll kind of let this wheel get off the coping a little more on this side. So you're kind of putting a pressure. So your foot's flat when you lock in, but then when you go to come in, it helps you manual it in and almost pop this wheel off the coping into the hand. So that, and instead of leaning over it and jumping this way, you almost think about it like a rewind. In and pulling it back, you know?
Yeah.
So that's probably the two main things I'd say.
Okay.
Ah, it's right there.
Woo! That was it.
That was perfect.
I think that was it.
Yeah,
I felt it.
I think that was it too.
Yeah, I felt what you meant, like rolling it back instead of like trying to hop.
It's like a rewind.
Yeah, because I think I was doing this.
Exactly.
Instead of just like that.
I think you have it honestly now.
Yeah.
Now that you broke the ice, I feel like because you're so good at
it felt
rock
so
fakies,
natural.
yeah.
Like it didn't feel weird.
How long do you think you were trying that for in total?
Over the last week, I've been out here 4 or 5 times, an hour a time.
Okay.
So about 5 hours over the last week.
Just Feeble Fakie.
Just that.
Really?
Like nothing else.
That's what's up.
Yeah, I did it over
work.
there one day, then over here, then I've been going back and forth right here. Every time I come, I haven't even really been doing other tricks. I just literally been going up, to where I can like.
And was there a certain thing that kind of broke it through, or mindset change, or?
Well, I feel like it was feeling like I was more on my back foot and rolling my foot off instead of trying to release the back wheel by slightly hopping.
Okay.
Which I think is what I was trying to do before in my own mind. I was almost like it's a mini like fakie ollie back into the transition.
Really?
Yeah, because I kind of felt like I had to hop in order to get the wheel off. Instead of just like what you told me was to roll my foot. So go like this, roll.
Oh, that's awesome.
So from that position to just that position. And that's what I did the last time right there.
It looked like you've been doing it your whole life.
Oh, dude. Now I will be.
So as you guys heard from him, the main obstacle was getting that wheel off the coping, right? And almost felt like he had to hop off. So that's the heel to toe method I always talk about, right? And I just mentioned it with the Feeble Fakie. You know, you're shifting your weight onto your toe to kind of pop that wheel off. But, you know, with a pivot fakie, it's much more exaggerated because you're locking in, you're standing up on it. So you really press on your heel and then you press on your toe to get that wheel off. So that's just something I would heel toe, like it's burned in my mind. With the Feeble, it's not as obvious, but it definitely, as you guys saw, it had an effect, and it's kind of what opened it up for him. So yeah, guys, give that a try, and hopefully it makes it easier to come back in. All right, now let's talk about grinding this trick. So on a bigger ramp, it's gonna be much easier because there's less resistance on your wheels due to the steepness. It's a lot easier for the board to go sideways when, you know, the ramp dips down. Also, with round coping, it's gonna be much easier than that square edge that we were just talking about because the wheel has a place to lock in on and you could just sit really well right on top of that. Now, if you notice here, I got this one wheel locked on right here that's holding me in place, but this wheel here is always most likely going to be touching the coping, or it can at some point. So that's where with this trick, you have to really learn to lean back and sit on your back leg. And almost as much as you can without putting your weight on the front or lifting the back up. All right, so you just want to be sitting on it so your weight's centered here and it's giving you that power to push through any resistance in the front. So when I lock in, I almost think about it like I'm poking my front foot out a little bit. So I'm sitting back on my back leg and just like poking that leg out. But whatever works for you guys. One of the cool things about a Feeble Fakie is even if you don't lock it in like perfectly and your wheel touches, it kind of just moves on its own. Like the momentum of the board when you lock in kind of drifts that way anyway. So if you don't feel comfortable dropping in, you could probably pop it right into a rock and then come in just to start feeling more comfortable. Okay, and the last part is coming back in. So the main thing obviously you want to focus on is pressing on the tail long enough to make sure your front wheels don't hit. I'd rather manual for a little extra time than put it down too quick and end up catching the coping. Now at first, you probably don't want to grind super fast and long, right? You're gonna just start slow, maybe get a little grind, right? And then come to a stop and then come back in. Eventually you'll build up to being able to grind and come back in while you're grinding. And then eventually, well, the point I've gotten to is I almost do kind of a power slide, like a blunt slide as I'm coming in. So I'm grinding, I get a little bit light-footed, slide my wheels in, and that gives me extra control. So depends what level you're at. I wouldn't recommend doing that in the beginning, but that's something that kind of helped me have more control over the trick and maneuver it however I want. And once you get that trick down, you can try to learn some variations. All right guys, hope this video was helpful. Leave a comment, let me know what trick you'd like to learn next, and I'll see you in the next video.